Ah! Well, hey there guys, I'm Axel the Beast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, ZeldaEngine.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. Our first question comes from Gygus. What are your thoughts on Link and Skyward Sword having baggy pants? Do you think skinny pants were better? The problem with, I don't really care, I guess. The thing is I don't really get the significance of Link's pants. I mean, it's just his pants. I mean, I'm not exactly in the habit of checking out other guys, and I guess Link is a fairly attractive dude, and his outfit is kind of interesting, but, I think the pants are kind of a small point. If they work on the design, they work on the design. I don't think there's anything wrong with his pants. Vixie Link asks, I never got what was going on between Jolene from Phantom Hourglass and Linebeck. Why is she mad at him? How did they know each other? Alas, this is like the only non-Skyward Sword question of this mailbag. I'm sure it won't be as focused next mailbag, unless you guys, that's all you guys send me, of course. But, to answer your question, basically, they explained this somewhat in the game, but a while back, Jolene was being attacked by a sea monster, and Linebeck found her and accidentally saved her by ramming the monster with his ship while trying to run away. So they actually started traveling together and adventuring together, and at some point, Linebeck decided to leave, and he stole a bunch of her treasure. Now, bad move on Linebeck's part, obviously, but that's actually not why she was upset at him. It was ultimately, I believe, because she cared a lot about him and possibly was even in love with him. On a somewhat unrelated note, that was actually, the whole thing with Linebeck is just one of my favorite things about Phantom Hourglass. I thought its storytelling with the character of Linebeck was great, and I think I've talked about this before, but, I just wanted to say that. But that's the answer to your question, basically. You could probably read up more about it, but that's the gist. Turo601 asks, what do you think of the Ocarina of Time appearing in Skyward Sword? Do you think it's possible that we will learn the origins of the mystical ocarina, or just see a cameo? I don't know, it's possible. One thing is that the Ocarina of Time is very important to, like, the Hyrule Royal family and their history and stuff, as is the Wind Waker, really, because the Wind Waker was used to conduct the sages on their, when they played their instruments. So, it's a very strong possibility in a way, because it's a crucial part of this, all that, and it was heavily connected to the Master Sword, which we're going to see, the origins of in this game, so it kind of makes sense. At the same time, even though there's that, I'm kind of skeptical that we're actually going to see, like, these elements that are brought up to be, like, the title objects of each game. I'm reluctant to say we'll ever see any of them again, particularly, because I kind of think it goes like, they're brainstorming the Zelda games, and, like, it's like, what item are we going to come up to name this game after? How about a musical instrument? Let's make it an ocarina. Okay. Now what about this next game? What will we do again? How about another instrument? Sure. And let's do an instrument again! How about we just do a princess? Or something along those lines. I mean, I think that they do that. I think that they come up with them game for game. I don't think it's something that they necessarily keep in mind to, have recurring through the series. Though it's, again, kind of an important one, so, we'll have to see. How many times do I end off my questions with the phrase, we'll have to see? Awesome asks, I know you said that you thought that voice acting was most likely to be inevitable for the Zelda series, but what do you prefer it to, would you prefer it to stay in text format or move on to voice acting? I've answered this question before, but I think my opinion has changed somewhat. In the past I've wanted it to stay as text, not because voice acting would be done badly or anything, but just because I prefer the kind of unique style of how they always have them talking, in text, but then they'll have, like, the exaggerated mannerisms of the characters and weird noises that they make. I always kind of liked that. I thought it had its own style. As of now, I think ultimately I'm kind of indifferent. I mean, the voice acting would be great. I don't mind if they keep the text things, but sometimes I think that Nintendo, and Zelda included, kind of need to learn to move on to, like, modern innovations in games instead of just coming up with their own ideas, so they should keep doing that too. And I think that's kind of applicable to Zelda. So, either one, but possibly the voice acting. Ganon's Bane asks, you have been saying that you think Vaati will be in Skyward Sword, but how could this be? Wasn't he a Minish before the Minish Cat? I actually haven't been saying I think he will be. I was just saying I think it's a possibility. He's actually not one of the characters I consider to be a major contender or whatever for the main villain of the game, or even to appear in the game, really. Yeah, that is one of the major problems with the idea. I mean, there's a lot of little things that support the notion. I think I brought some of them up in my last article that I wrote, the Pale Figure, the new character of Skyward Sword. I mentioned some of it in that article. You can go check it out. But, by the way, that's actually the article I promised you guys I was going to write. Well, one of the two articles I promised. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of things that suggest Vaati will be in the game, but at the same time, that is like one of the big things that kind of makes it impossible. Granted, no, the timeline is kind of messed up. I mean, even the obvious connections, there's like things that are like lost in translation, and things that just aren't explained between the games, no matter what you connect on the timeline. So some of that stuff crops up anyway. So an imperfect timeline connection with weird problems like that isn't impossible. It's even happened before. So I don't really know, but yeah, it is kind of unlikely that Vaati will end up as the guy in Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword. Yeah, that was. We'll just let that one stay on. I'm not gonna even edit that out. Jules626 asks, in the new Skyward Sword trailer, there's a screenshot that shows a harp set to the up pad. Do you think a harp will be the new instrument for the game, or might it have another cause for being there? Yeah, well, one way or another, that basically means it's an item. I mean, it could be like some kind of like trade sequence item or something you're just carrying as part of a quest, but ultimately it's some kind of item. If it's going to be like the instrument, like the big thing of the game, well, yeah, it could be that. I'm still skeptical that the game is going to be entirely based off an instrument anyway. I think it's just going to be based off the sword. But, it could be that. Additionally, it could imply the presence of the Sheikah in Skyward Sword, which I've talked down on that notion in the past, but I've actually sort of changed my mind on it a bit. I'll probably touch on it again. I'm referencing my articles, but I'll probably touch on it again in my next article a little bit. And feel free to ask me questions on that subject specifically. It doesn't exactly relate to this one, so I'll save it for another question if you guys feel like asking it. But yeah, it's some kind of item. You can probably play it. I don't know if it's gonna be like a major aspect of the game, but you can probably play it, and it may connect to the Sheikah. I strum my harp. A melody so soothing it kills bosses. Driorianos asks, while I agree about the unlikelihood of the character in the Skyward Sword trailer being the Majora Skull Kid, it does bring to mind the Lost Woods itself. What do you think the chances are of that area of Hyrule playing a part in Skyward Sword? I'd say very high, actually. I think all of the like major locations that we're familiar to seeing, like Lake Hylia, the Lost Woods, etc., are totally going to appear in Skyward Sword. They may actually be a part of Skyloft itself, because the lands are supposed to be one and they're going to get reunited or whatever. And we don't see them come down till later. I don't really know. Maybe there's going to be a mix of the two. And it could mean interesting stuff on the timeline, what areas we see or don't see. I mean, usually I don't apply the geography to being important in Zelda with the timeline, but that's something that could be a little interesting with Skyward Sword in particular, because it's like this total prequel. As for I think it's incredibly likely because I don't know, just the Lost Woods is the single most important location in Zelda. Period. I mean, even like Hyrule Castle, not as important, which is funny because it's the Hyrule Castle. The Lost Woods is crucial. It's pivotal. There's the Master Sword is there. Just everything. There's no way it's not going to be in the game. Not if it's Hyrule anyway. Tony V asks, what do you make of the shield meter that appears in the new trailer? What do you think it is for? There's not a lot to say about it at this point because we really don't know. So I'll make it real brief. It could be like the stamina meter, just redesigned, but I think it actually shows the stamina meter appearing, like, when you use it, so I don't think so. But I think some people have proposed that it's like a durability meter for the shield, which could be interesting. It would force you to, like, replace your shields more often. Or, it could be like more like magic points or a magic meter, but more for like techniques and stuff, like for the sword beam that they show you using or something. I don't know. It would be interesting to see, but I can't really go on it further than that. Just speculation. I think those are the most likely options anyway. Last question. Epic Link asks, in The Adventure of Link, the story from the manual talked about how Princess Zelda was put under a sleeping spell by a magician, and that the prince, who is who was close to the magician, ordered every female child born in the royal family be named Zelda, hence the Legend of Zelda. Since Skyward Sword is about the origin of Hyrule and the royal family, do you think we'll see this event occur in the game? Well, the origin of the royal family thing isn't proven, but it's incredibly likely. I'm not too familiar with the Adventure of Link story stuff, although I've read some of it, and I know that what you said is pretty much true, because I haven't played the game yet. But, one thing is, it would be interesting and awesome if we saw that connection, yet at the same time, I'm somewhat, I'm unsure of how the old games, like the old NES games, are going to play into the timeline stuff, because, you know, it's just never been clear how they were supposed to go in the timeline, I think. I think ever since, like, the Wind Waker came out, that whole thing has been totally confused. In some ways, I hope Skyward Sword clears some of that up. In some ways, I hope Skyward Sword sort of decides that these aspects of the timeline that are just broken, they're just separate. Kind of like a Final Fantasy thing, where some series of games go on their own, and another series of games go on their own. I kind of wish they do that. It would just make things simpler and more standalone, make things free to just do cool stuff. So, yeah. Alright guys, that's it for this time. Be sure to send your questions to the email address or contact page down in the description, and I'll see you guys later.